Welcome to Chapter 3, Lesson 3, Carbohydrates and Protein. So this lesson is a little bit longer, I think, than some of the others. Our assignments, there's like one extra assignment, so you might want to think about that. There's a very quick worksheet on determining how much protein you need. There's another assignment looking at labels to see how much sugar is in a label. There's a discussion about sugar, like it has been decided that sugar was added to the label, so you can think about how that affects the shopping habits of people. The project this week is just organizing the food that you wrote from the 7-day recall into food groups, and then there's a response. I feel like it's one other thing. Okay, so that's some of the assignments. This lesson is looking at both protein and carbs. So these are the two macronutrients that do provide calories. So we talked about fat. That provides 9 calories per gram. Now protein and carbs both provide 4 calories per gram. They're important, as many of you noted in your why you eat what you eat, is that protein is very important, especially for athletes or if you're working out. It's also important for older people as they are losing lean body mass. It's good to increase protein. That's the newest research. And then for carbohydrates, we've discovered that probably one of the reasons we have obesity issues is because back in the 80s we thought that by cutting fat we could cut obesity rates, but instead what happened is we cut fat and increased carbohydrates, but unfortunately we didn't suggest high fiber carbs. We usually gave very refined carbs, and that caused actually an increase in fat production, because as we ate more carbs, our body just turned the carbs to fat. So there's one of the theories behind obesity. Looking at protein then, just briefly, protein has many functions. You all know it has to do with muscle repair, muscle growth, but it has other functions too. Structurally, it's part of connective tissue besides muscles. It's part of the hemoglobin, which carries the oxygen in our blood. It helps maintain fluid balance. So by having protein in our blood, it holds the water so we don't lose too much water in our tissues. It helps maintain the correct pH of our blood in our body. It's also one of the main components of hormones and enzymes, which are important for every aspect of digestion and even just our body functioning normally. It's one of the main components of our immune system, is the antibodies and antigens are protein based, and you can receive energy from protein. Although it's usually recommended that we try to spare protein and use carbohydrate and fat as our main calorie source, and save the protein for muscle growth and cell repair. So amino acids are the basic blocks that build up a protein. You think of a protein as like a pearl necklace. It's a chain of a lot of amino acids, but there's only 20 different amino acids. However, any combination of these amino acids could make up a protein. So there's hundreds of thousands of ways that amino acids could go together in a chain. So of these 20 amino acids, only 9 are essential in our diet. So when you're taking protein shakes or you're trying to eat extra steak, we actually make 11 of the amino acids. As long as we have ingested these 9 essentials, our bodies can produce the others. So mainly we get amino acids from animal products or certain plant products. We'll talk briefly about which plant products. Okay, so the next thing here's the chain, the polypeptide chain, which poly means many peptides. A peptide is just 2 or 3 amino acids stuck together, so they have a particular arrangement. We don't need to worry about that in this class, but each of these 20 amino acids, they all have, for instance, a nitrogen, an amine group, which is called an amine group. And so anyway, there's certain peptide bonds, and that's what is a constituent for a protein. When we are eating animal products, there's something called complementary protein. So people that are vegetarians, or if you decide not to eat meat 1 or 2 days a week, there's a combination of grains and legumes that need to be eaten together, because each of these non-animal products is not a complete protein. It's missing some of those 9 amino acids. So I like this picture here because it talks about this barrel. So for instance, these grains are deficient in 1 amino acid. So if you have a low amount of amino acid, that's the limiting amino acid, and you can't use all the other amino acids unless they're all present. So That's why when you eat a grain, you usually can't just eat grains all day and have complete protein. You have to combine it with some legume. So the legumes are high in lysine, so that fills in that missing link so that now you can actually use the other 8 amino acids because you've completed this. So people that are vegetarian have to make sure to eat the right combination of plant products. The RDA for protein is not really a number so much as it is a percent of your calories. So the minimum is 10%, maximum 35%, and you'll be figuring this out in one of your homework assignments. For most people, it's just 8.8 grams per kilogram, so you can figure that out, and that's another homework assignment. If you're an endurance athlete, up to 1.7 grams per kilogram, or if you're weightlifting, it might be 1.2. So there's different recommendations depending on what your athletic event is. We can't store protein as such, it's just stored in our cells. So if we don't have enough protein, we are under consuming protein, then we can use it by breaking down our cell components. The food sources then are animal products, eggs, beans, grains, as we already mentioned. Of course, a lot of protein foods are high in fat, so there's a way to make sure that we try to eat lean animal products. Here's the way to determine your protein needs. Just take 0.8 times your kilogram body weight to multiply those together to get how many. So this person at 154 pounds converts to 70 kilograms. You can convert pounds to kilograms by dividing by 2.2. So now we have determined that they have 56 gram need every day. And here just shows the different levels of fat. So if I have a ham steak, it has 40 grams of protein. So does a 6-ounce porterhouse steak. But look at the other differences. This one has 2.5 grams of fat. This has 12. This has 2,000 milligrams of sodium. This only has 1,200. Or looking at salmon, it's similar amount of protein, much lower in sodium and saturated fat, and it has omega-3 as well. So again, what fats you choose, what meats you choose will affect other macronutrients. Serving size we talked about in lesson 1, like what is a serving size? So usually you typically eat 2 to 3 ounces of lean meat at a serving. This ping pong ball is considered 1 ounce, so that's equivalent to like a tablespoon of peanut butter. 1 egg is considered a serving, 2 tablespoons of peanut butter, an ounce of cheese. So all of these servings are equivalent in the amount of protein they contribute, except for I will say that these are equal to about 1 ounce of meat. A standard serving of meat is 2 to 3 ounces, but well, you actually looked this up. This slide is not showing very good equivalence because I think it's only a quarter cup of dried beans, 1 egg, 1 tablespoon peanut butter, and 1 ounce of meat that are equivalent. I don't think that's important right now, but that is something that we have to talk about and think about what equivalent protein sources are. So we can increase plant proteins in this way, adding peanut butter, using soy milk, adding beans to our taco, putting seeds in our salad. Those are ways to increase the protein. Here is one of the recommendations. The Cancer Institute, or the American Institute for Cancer Research recommends that we increase our vegetables and whole grains and beans, and then we eat less animal protein. So thinking about half your plate being fruits and vegetables instead of half your plate being meat. Then the other macronutrient we'll briefly mention is carbohydrates, and this includes simple carbohydrates, which is added sugar, and complex carbohydrates, which is the fiber, and also starch. So even like a potato has complex carbohydrate in it. Anything that's starch that's not a simple sugar, like you don't eat flour, it doesn't taste like sugar does. That's a starch. So they're both carbohydrates, but this is sweeter because it's been refined. So here is the needs we have for carbohydrate. Our recommendation is a minimum of 130 grams. If you notice on one of the worksheets you did, the daily value recommendation is 300 grams a day of carbohydrate. And that's about the average intake. And so the percent of our calories, again, like we talked about with protein, is about half, somewhere around half our calories come from carbohydrates. Fiber, on the other hand, there isn't an RDA. You notice this AI, this adequate intake, so they don't know exactly what the best fiber intake would be, but they're guessing 25 for women, 38 for men. Or you can calculate it this way, how many grams per 1,000 calories. So if you eat a really high calorie diet, you might need more fiber. The recommendation is higher than what most of us take in. So that's why we're trying to increase our fiber intake. So the simple sugar I was talking about, the sugar that tastes sweet, is one of these 3 carbohydrates. They're called monosaccharides. Very simple carbohydrate circle here that is the sweetest. So these are all monosaccharides. So table sugar is a combination of glucose and fructose, for instance. The disaccharides are combinations, of course, of the monosaccharides. So now you're getting it's still a simple sugar. It's still pretty sweet because that's table sugar. But as you add more and more of these monosaccharides together, you have what's called a polysaccharide, and it becomes a chain, sort of like we saw with the protein. So it's a chain of monosaccharides, and these are what give us energy. You might see it. This is just a chain. A straight chain is called amylose, and a branched chain is called amylopectin. And that affects how we cook and so forth, but it doesn't really affect the calories. Fiber is the 3rd type of complex carbohydrate. It's also a polysaccharide. And the reason fiber is different is we don't have an enzyme. Like we can easily break apart any of these monosaccharides with the enzymes in our body, but we cannot break apart a fiber starch because it's a little different configuration and we have no enzymes. It can only be digested in our colon. So here we can match different carbohydrates. So for instance, a disaccharide, or glucose is a monosaccharide, sucrose is a disaccharide, lactose is also, glycogen is a really complex polysaccharide. Rice contains a lot of polysaccharides as a starch. Milk has lactose in it, which is a disaccharide. Celery has fiber or cellulose, which is a polysaccharide. And then potatoes has a polysaccharide, a starch in it. Fiber then, it's indigestible. As we said, we don't have the enzymes to break it apart. But in our colon, there is some bacteria. Some fibers our colon can break down. That's called soluble fiber. Some fiber our colon cannot break down, and that's called non-fermentable fiber. And this is good because it helps move the bowels and it prevents cancer. This is good also because it provides energy for the microbes in your colon. So it keeps a really healthy colon. It resists the starch is kind of a type of soluble fiber. The benefits of fiber, as I already mentioned, is it helps hold moisture so you don't become constipated. And also, here we go, it also prevents some of these diseases of the colon. This viscous fiber or the soluble fiber slows down digestion so we don't get that headache like you get from eating a candy bar. The fiber kind of slows things down. And it does prevent heart disease and diabetes. The sources of fiber, so insoluble fiber, would be things like wheat bran, pistachio nuts, almonds, lentils. They all have insoluble fiber and some soluble fiber, which you can see the amount. So all these beans and nuts and even flours have these fibers in them. The recommendations right now is that we need to increase our whole grains. 90% of Americans do not meet the whole grain recommendation. And the thing that's hard is when you start looking at labels, this looks like a really good source, honey wheat bread, and yet when you read the label, it only says wheat flour. There's no fiber at all. All flour is wheat flour. So it doesn't mean it has fiber because it says wheat. So either one of these breads is low in fiber. They're not good choices. So you can find a good choice by looking for flour or labels that say whole grain or that might have the sticker on it. Because these are some of the best fiber contents. Here's an example of an ingredient label: whole grain wheat. So that's a insoluble fiber. Corn bran, that's also insoluble fiber. This also has a non-nutritive sweetener, aspartame. It also has cellulose, added cellulose, which is another fiber. So you can see there's a lot of ingredients to look for to know if it has fiber or not. But from this list, you can note that there's not necessarily any benefit of wheat flour until it says whole wheat, unrefined, made from the entire whole wheat kernel, or whole grain fiber. Those are the 2 flours you want to see on a label. Here's the label again. This shows whole grain oats. And then it has the sweetened sugar. So this honey brown sugar syrup is a simple sugar. So the fiber comes from this whole grain, and the sugar comes from this sugar syrup.